So, ladies and gentlemen, may I welcome you again to our next session. Please take a seat. It is really a great and extraordinary pleasure to have for the first time in the Vienna Migration Conference somebody from the African Commission. So, let me welcome Her Excellency Amira El Fadil, Commissioner for Social Affairs at the African Union Commission. We have been in touch for many times. You have been attending via the web, also the last conference, but we never had you here in Vienna. So let me say a very warm welcome to you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Director General of ICMPD. Thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of the African Union Commission. And thank you for a very productive partnership between the African Union Commission and ICMPD. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. If I look to your portfolio, it combines health, humanitarian affairs, and social development. So this is really a lot to achieve. And for that, if we are looking at this moment, what has happened during the last year, I remember quite well you said last year, COVID-19 is not the main problem for Africa, but there are still others, and especially challenges because of regional conflicts, because of economic issues, because of different vulnerabilities. But as we can see now, COVID-19 is also really an issue for Africa. So maybe my first question would be, what is your assessment today? What is the situation at the moment?
COVID-19 as a pandemic that affected the whole world, and Africa is part of this, is really impacting negatively on our socioeconomic sectors in Africa. But I look always to the positive angles of everything. Yes, I'm not ignoring challenges or hardships, but I always look to where are the opportunities, because in every crisis there is an opportunity. The opportunity for us as African Union was to make sure that the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which was established in 2017 as a new technical institution for fighting and combating pandemics in Africa, to make sure that this center will lead the whole continent and make the whole continent speak with one voice in solidarity. And this one, I can assure you that Africa did it. We managed from February 2020 to have one continental policy to fight COVID-19. It was adopted by the ministers of health of the whole continent. It is a framework that's been respected by all our member states. And Africa CDC had the opportunity to lead with our member states and with the partners in Europe and globally. We managed to minimize the risk to the continent, and I can say that although we are affected like the rest of the world by this pandemic, but still we have the least fatalities globally. Also in terms of the infections, we have less infections. Yes, our health systems are struggling in many of our member states, but we are learning lessons. We are joining our efforts. We are sharing the responsibility to fight COVID-19. And we have many successes down the road from the beginning on having the right equipment for COVID-19. And now, while facing the challenges of vaccine accessibility, also Africa CDC is doing its best to make sure that we will access vaccines. We have our share of COVAX as part of the rest of the world, but also we have created our own mechanism called AVAT, African Union Vaccine Acquisition Task Force, and this one is led by the President of South Africa in partnership with the private sector of the continent. So in spite of the pandemic, in spite of all the challenges of the pandemic, we managed as Africa to come together, we managed to speak with one voice, and we managed to minimize the risk of our continent. But the challenge is far from over. COVID itself is far from over, and now we are trying to normalize ourselves, to adapt ourselves to these challenges of COVID-19.
Thank you so much for your explanation. I think of course, if we are looking in the context of migration and the influence that the pandemic situation has done to the whole migration issues. I think one of the issues is remittances went down. As we all know, the decrease was extraordinary, and this influences, of course, the life of families. And so overall, what would you think about the assessment of COVID-19 and migration issues?
You know, our African Institute for Remittances, which is highly supported by the European Union and you and other partners, is doing its best to make sure that the decrease in remittances flow to the continent will not affect greatly the beneficiaries. We know that this flow of money that goes to Africa, people spend it on basic services. It's on health, livelihood issues, it's on education issues. So it goes back to the families. Yes, the overall economies are benefiting, but it goes directly to affect the lives of the people. So that's, in that sense, the COVID-19 affected our remittances. Also, COVID-19 affected in losing jobs. And my department also is responsible about labor and employment. Millions, according to the reports of UNECA, that more than 25 million people in Africa lost their jobs. So it means 25 million families. So the effect on job loss is great. The effect on poverty, the effect on women, because also gender-based violence increased during COVID-19. Child marriages increased. All these harmful traditional practices, according to our reports, it increased because of the restrictions of COVID-19. So the impact of COVID-19 is something that we need to deal with it for many years to come. We need to see how are we going to bring back our economies, how are we going to make sure that our societies will come together, they will be supporting each other. We need an internal support before looking for an external support. We want to make sure that our civil society organizations work closely with our governments to make sure that the benefits, it will be maximized, and that with this socioeconomic impact of COVID-19, it will be less than what we are expecting it. And the African Union developed a comprehensive paper on how are we going to deal with post-COVID-19 pandemic. And this strategic paper, it was developed by all the departments within the Union, and it was shared with our partners from the United Nations agencies and shared with our RECs and member states. So I think this is a guiding document that it will lead the continent if it's implemented, and we are hoping that it will be adopted in our coming summit in February. It will help the continent to have a clear vision on how are we going to deal with the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19.
Thank you so much for this clear picture about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic situation to migration. We are talking about partnership, and so I would like to turn to the partnership between Europe and Africa. There was a special experience with Libyan refugees. We all know about the pictures we have seen from the refugee camps in Libya, and the idea was to have, with 3 partners, a task force to be implemented. This was African Union, European Union, and United Nations. How to bring back people out of these camps in their countries of origin. And I think this was a very clear sign of partnership. But having you here, we would like to have your assessment. What is your experience with this partnership and this task force?
Thank you, Director, for asking this question. But let me give a brief background. I was elected as a commissioner in January 2017, and this issue of the Libyan migrants erupted in the media reports in October and November 2017. And in November 2017, we had the Africa-Europe Summit, the EU-EU Summit in Abidjan. And that's where our leaders met. Guterres and From the European Union, it was the deputy, and from the African Union, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, and in presence of many leaders from the two continents, they decided that they need to establish a tripartite mechanism. Because we know that there is a very complicated political situation in Libya. No country alone can deal with this very complicated issue, so we need a joint efforts and collaboration between the three of us. That's how the tripartite task force came into being. The tripartite task force is led by the African Union in partnership with the European Union and the United Nations represented with IOM and UNHCR. This mechanism has two levels, the highest political level, the one I just mentioned, and the technical level chaired from Addis Ababa, and is chaired by me. I find this mechanism a very effective mechanism. And I'm saying this looking to the achievements that we managed to do since 2017. We managed to repatriate more than 50,000 African migrants from Libya to their countries of origin. And for me, this is a very big achievement. We managed to dismantle many detention centers in Libya. And I had the opportunity to visit Libya myself as a special envoy on migration to Libya. I visited Libya, I can say 4 times. And I managed to visit in collaboration with the government of Libya. I visited even the detention centers. I spoke to the people on the ground. I met UN agencies in Libya. We have our office in Tunisia that observe the development on these issues in Libya. So I had the chance to visit, and I can say that this is one of our achievements. We are proud of it. We did it, but we did it together. African Union, United Nations, and the European Union. Also, through this tripartite mechanism, we managed to introduce the program of the reintegration and readmission. Because one of the challenges of the repatriated migrants, that they have limited chances to be reintegrated into their countries, into their communities. We take them back, yes, in a voluntary return program with IOM, but when they go back to their countries, they go empty-handed. They have nothing. They don't know where to start from. So that's why these programs of reintegration and readmission of the migrants in their countries of origin is a very important programs, and I kept advocating for this through my term in the African Union. I kept on pushing. We had very successful workshop. We have donors from around the world that are interested to work with us and to invest in this kind of programs, whether startup programs or microfinance programs or different kinds of programs and projects. We are doing it right now with some of our member states, but we need to invest more in this area. Because from our statistics, from our experience, if these migrants, after being returned to their countries of origin, they had no opportunities, no chances, they will go again for another attempt of migration. Whether they fail or they succeed, they will do it again and again. But if we want to address part of the root causes of why these people left their countries and went on these horrible journeys is by giving them opportunities at home. So this is some of the achievements of the tripartite mechanism. The last time I spoke with the European Union ambassador, I told her that we need to keep this mechanism alive. We need always to revitalize this mechanism because we have more reports, we have more information that this important mechanism needs to work more and to continue repatriating and continue addressing the root causes of migration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. I think 50,000 people, this is a remarkable number. And of course, a lot of work is behind that, especially if you are looking forward for reintegration measures.
And if you allow me to add, Director, that also for the refugees and the asylum seekers, we had an agreement with the government of Rwanda and UNHCR. So for these categories to be hosted in Rwanda. And that's how we established the Gashura camp in Rwanda. And these people are processed from Rwanda. And in spite of COVID-19, the resettlement is going on. I visited the Gashura camp in March this year. I sat with the government of Rwanda and with UNHCR in Rwanda. And yes, there is delays in the settlement programs, but more than 50% of those being hosted in Rwanda have been resettled in many European countries, and some of them in Canada, some of them in even Australia, in different countries around the world, but 50% of them is already been resettled. And the resettlement program, although it is slow, but it's going on. And we consider this ETM also is one of the opportunities created because of the task force. Last week, I signed an extension for this MOU between us, Rwanda, and UNHCR. We are extending till 2023. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the success stories that it can be replicated in other member states in Africa. And it's part of sharing the burden between the African member states themselves and finding solutions for our African problems by African member states. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very positive example, and it should give us also some hope for the future, because if something is happening like that, you can see it can work if you have the right conditions in place.
Yes.
And for that, European countries often are talking about readmission agreements, about return of refugees that are not accepted in the countries. So this is a very sensitive issue, of course, for the countries of origin, for the countries of transit. But anyhow, what is your perspective for this? Because negotiations are ongoing since years. Do you think there could be, maybe if you look back to this positive example, a new mechanism where we could see some efforts also in the whole issue of return and readmission?
Let me start from a very important cornerstone in this conversation. We need to have the right policies in place as Africa. And I think this is what we did in 2018. We updated our policy framework on migration with an action plan, and we have it from 2018 to 2030, fully aligned with our Agenda 2063 for the continent, which is our strategic framework, and at the same time fully aligned with Agenda 2030, the SDGs. So this policy, for me, it is where we put our vision as Africa on how to deal with migration. And when we speak about migration, I know that all of us, we always concentrate on irregular migration, we speak more about trafficking, but we speak about the whole issue of migration from a positive perspective, not ignoring addressing the irregular migration and the human trafficking and the smuggling of migrants. For me, this comprehensive policy, and the center is the center of policy, ICMD, is very important. Our challenge is how to make sure that these policies are implemented on the national level. This is one of the challenges. I'm speaking while looking to the whole continent in front of me, while looking to the 55 member states in Africa, and this migration issue is affecting the whole continent, whether internal migration or external migration. And let me mention here that the internal migration in Africa is the majority. By statistics, 80% of the migration is happening within the continent, and we are encouraging it as African Union. We are encouraging more integration in the continent, and that's why we have the ACFTA, the free trade area, and that's why we are talking about economic integration. That's why we have in the pipeline the free movement protocol, because we want to take barriers between African member states so they can move internally, they can have more opportunities between the member states itself. And you know, Africa is a rich continent, and we have resources, we have opportunities. Maybe we lack more skills, more innovations, more scientific approaches, but still the basis is there, the vision is there, the policy is there. The challenges is in the implementation part. The challenges in the implementation part, it leads me to say that, do we have mechanisms in place? Before I speak about partnership, yes, we have mechanisms. We have looked into our gaps, whether in the labor migration or our gaps in the area of statistics and information, and that's why we are part of the Global Compact on Migration. And when we went to be part of the intergovernmental negotiations on Global Compact, we first developed our common African position. So also on this, we spoke with one voice in New York, and we had our share. We made sure that our interest as Africa is incorporated in this Global Compact. We came back to the continent to look into what do we need to do to improve ourselves as Africa. We said we have no statistics, that's our own. We have no information. And this is the first objective of the Global Compact, is to address the challenges in the information gap. So that's why we went on the establishment of 3 centers in the continent for the first time. That centers goes under the umbrella of the African Union Commission. That's why we went with His Majesty the King of Morocco to establish the Observatory on Migration in Rabat, which we launched in December last year. With the government of Mali, we have established the Center for Research and Statistics in Mali. We are in the process of upgrading the center, the Regional Operational Center of Khartoum, to be a continental center. ROC, I'm sure you know ROC, and ROC is also a partnership between the Horn of Africa countries and the European Union, and is part of the Khartoum process. So we have these 3 centers now. This is a new development in the continent. It's an achievement to the African Union. It gave us the opportunity to address very closely the issues of migration. We are looking now to studying and looking to very deeply into why our young people in Africa migrating. What are they looking for abroad? What do they lack at home? The statistics, and for every country to know how many young people are fleeing the country looking for opportunities outside. How can we manage to break the barriers and to give the same young generations to have opportunities at home? What do they lack? Do they need more skills? Do they need better education? Do they need social equality? Do they need better governance of systems? Do they need more democracy? What do they need? So these 3 centers, I'm expecting that it will play a very significant role in developing issues of migration in the continent. And of course, I will take the opportunity to call upon all partners to work very closely with the 3 centers, and we can share with you all the information needed. I keep on speaking to partners that we need you, we need your expertise to make sure that these 3 centers will function to the purpose, and it will function very quickly. This is one of the areas I like to speak about, that we have centers, but as you know, Director, we have between us and as the European Union, as a main partner on migration, we have Rabat process, we have Khartoum process, we have the Horn of Africa initiative, we have Valletta. But let me speak reflecting on my 5-year experience at the African Union. We create mechanisms, we work with it, but for some reason, we just neglect it and we go for a new one. This I don't understand. We have very good mechanism, and we go to create a new mechanism, and then again we look for, this one is one of the challenges, and we speak here as partners. We need to look into why. Why are we working hard on Khartoum process, but not on Valletta? Why are we leaving Valletta? Is Valletta done with it? Is because the dynamic of migration, maybe there is good reasons why are we changing. Maybe the dynamics, the changing of the migration dynamics in the continent of Africa and here in Europe. So we need to see why, and we need to answer the question of why not having a holistic approach in addressing migration issues. And that's what lacks us. We have fragmented approaches, and I kept on speaking on these holistic and comprehensive approaches with all the delegations I met in Addis Ababa when I participate in some of the conferences internationally. Please let us look for a holistic approach. You cannot solve the problems of migration. When I speak about irregular migration, it cannot be addressed by one solution. We cannot say that by intercepting the migrants at the sea, bringing them back, this is a solution. We cannot say that by having more guards at the sea, we are solving the problem. Border management, no. We have to look into comprehensive approaches, multi-sectoral approaches on addressing these migration issues. We have to look to the root causes. Why are we having migration in the first place? Do we have more open corridors, legal corridors for people to migrate? Because people, they have the right to migrate. But they have the right to migrate, but they need to be encouraged to do it through legal corridors, not to go to be in the hands of the smugglers and the traffickers. So unless we address it from a holistic approach, we will not have concrete solutions. Also, if you allow me, Director, and you have to stop me, I'm a politician, you have to stop. one of the issues that we need to speak more about it, that there is a changing narrative of migration in Africa. And so is a changing narrative of migration issues in Europe. And I have listened very carefully this morning to the Minister of Interior when he spoke about migrants as a burden. So how are we going to make sure that the hosting communities and the hosting countries will not look to migrants as a burden? How are we going to change this? How are we going to make sure that they will look at these migrants as an asset, as an added value to the hosting communities? We need to discuss this. We need to discuss why migration issues became one of the agenda of the politicians all over Europe, and I'm speaking in Europe. Why? Why? We need to answer this question. For us, on our side, we need to always answer the question, why are we not giving our population more opportunities at home? So there is a shared responsibility on our side, on your side. What we need is we need to continue the dialogue. We have the continent-to-continent dialogue, Director, but we need to continue this dialogue on all levels. The continent-to-continent dialogue is between the African Union Commission and the European Union Commission. But it should not stop there. We need to take this dialogue to all levels, to the REX levels, to the national level between the countries, between the countries and the REX, between the REX and the continental level. So this dialogue should continue, the conversations should continue. The sharing of information between the two continents also, we need it to continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you are full of engagement. It's really impressive. We would like to have you many more years, but your mandate is running out.
Yeah.
This is a big pity. After 5 years in the African Commission, you are now starting maybe a new professional life. But anyhow, maybe you can give us at the end what will be, out of your wisdom, the advice to your successor. What should be reflected for the next years from the African Union point of view in migration partnership issues with Europe?
Thank you. The handover between me and my successor will be happening by the end of November. So it will be the end of my work at the African Union, which I enjoyed very much. It's a continental organization that has potentials in the future in bringing the continent together and have the integrating we are opting for. On the issue of migration, Director, and I'm not going to repeat myself, but while I'm handing over to my successor, and it's good that my successor is known to all of you. She's a former Commissioner for Political Affairs, Minata Sassouma. She's fully knowledgeable about refugees and IDPs because she was dealing with this portfolio when she was a Commissioner on Political Affairs. I'm sure I will hand over in details all the partnership I have on my side, but I will be advising her to work on the holistic approach I spoke about. There is no one solution for managing migration. There is multiple solutions, and it has to go parallel together, all of it. And the sharing of burden on managing migration, it should be a global one. Out of humanity, migrants' rights should be respected, irrelevant to their legal situations or positions. They have to be respected as humans. Then we look up to see how are we going to deal with them. And going for bilateral solutions is not helping. This is one of the observations, because I know that on our side, on the side of Europe, there is some attempts of having bilateral agreements. It doesn't work, because this issue of migration is affecting us all. It's affecting the whole continent of Africa, it's affecting the whole continent of Europe. So I'm pro having continent-to-continent solution. And it's good that we have our mechanisms. We have the summit between the European Union and the African Union. We have the ministerial meeting, which is coming next week in Rwanda. All the ministers of foreign affairs of Europe and all the ministers of foreign affairs of Africa, they will meet next week in Rwanda, and migration is on the agenda, and we are already talking about the declaration and the details of the declaration. So we have opportunities, and we have our mechanism I mentioned earlier between Europe and Africa. Both of us, we need to make sure that these mechanisms are strengthened because the continent-to-continent dialogue is a very good platform. The politicians they meet, the technical people they meet, and we are always looking into what we did, where are the gaps, what can be improved. I think we need to make sure that these mechanisms to be strengthened. ICMPD have a role to play in this area. You are working with us as African Union. The MOU we signed with ICMPD, I'm sure it will be respected by my successor. The implementation plan agreed between us and you. We should implement, and we should not be challenged by this COVID-19. And thank God we are a bit going out of COVID-19. We are adapting ourselves, trying to normalize our lives around it. We should continue, because COVID-19 itself is impacting negatively the migration efforts. Thank you, Director.
Thank you so much, Commissioner El Fadil. We appreciate it so much to work with you, and we would like to continue in the one or other way, and I'm sure we will find a very good solution. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it's great pleasure that we can finalize now this, and we would like to continue. But first, please give a big applause to Commissioner El Fadil. Here is a small present for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.